Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Pat Flynn Show. A sort of surprise Sunday morning live stream here. So a joy to have you, as always. For all of you who are tuning in, please do me a favor and smash that like button, hit subscribe. And my plan for this live stream, for this episode, is to answer we'll take whatever questions you have. So if you're just tuning in, cheers, grab a cup of coffee, and I will be glad to answer any questions you have on any topics that you would like. I also want to answer some questions that I kind of have that I promised I would get to, yet I have not had a chance to get to those questions. So this is kind of a catch-up episode in that sense. We got some good questions on a number of different topics. And then I wanted to share some books with you, a little book share. It's always a fun thing to do, isn't it? And of course, I would love to hear what you are currently reading. If you have anything interesting to share on that front, I would be very open to whatever recommendations that you have. So if you're tuning in live, let me know what is in your cup. I'm drinking, I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm drinking an oil slick. This is a super dark. Is this a French roast? I think it's a French roast. Little dab of coconut oil in there. Just the perfect way to start the morning. So it's good to be with you guys. By the way, I just want to put this out there, but we might have a very cool and unusual guest coming on the Pat Flynn Show relatively soon. I don't think you guys would ever be able to guess who this guest is going to be. And I don't want to say too much because it's pretty much locked in, but it isn't guaranteed yet. So I can't make any promises, but it's very exciting. It's very strange. It's a guest that I think pretty much everybody would know, but you would never expect. And if you have any guesses, if you get it right, I'll give you a prize. I'll give you a book or something. Alex says, I'm reading Rites of Passage by William Golding. How do you like it, Alex? Give us the executive summary, if you don't mind. So before we get to some questions, I just want to share a couple of books with you, and then drop whatever questions you have in the chat. Again, any and all topics are open. We got a couple philosophy and theology episodes coming up too, which will be fun. So we can talk about any of that. I've got a lot of fitness stuff in the bank. One thing I want to mention, and this is going to seem like terrible, shameless self-promotion, but it's actually not, is one of the first questions we had. This was from Instagram yesterday. I thought it was a good question, and it relates to sharing books, but it's going to relate to my book. And this comes from user, sorry, I have to read it, WJ Champ. And he says, looking back, what would you change about your Paleo Workouts for Dummies book? So there that is. Many of you probably already have this book. This was the first book that I wrote. And I promise you, pretty much all the other books I'm going to share today are not my book. And if you don't have this book, I think it's worth getting. It's the first book I ever wrote. And the question is, what would I change about it? And Dan John called this a terrific workout book with a terrible title. And just to give you a little backstory of this particular book, this came out sort of like when the paleo craze was really just kind of at its height. I'm sure most of you probably remember that time. And they had this book they wanted to do, and they needed somebody to do the fitness stuff with it. So they reached out to me, which is kind of an odd thing. But that's what happened. And they said, will you write this book, Paleo Workouts for Dummies? And I said, I don't know what a paleo workout is, but I'll write a fitness book according to my best knowledge of fitness and body weight and kettlebell training, like minimalist style training. And then you guys can call it whatever you want. And I urged them not to call it Paleo Workouts for Dummies. I urged them, but they did. And my prediction came to pass that paleo would kind of fall from the scene, which it has. But fortunately, the book still sells well. And it's still a good book. But the question is, what would I change about it? So first off, I think the book is a great comprehensive guide because it's got all sorts of tutorials in here. I'm sorry, the camera's backwards. I'm trying to show the picture of all the different exercises and lots of detailed programming. So if you can get over the awkward title, I think it's still a really valuable book. But there's two things I would change about it. So if you get the book now, there's two things I want you to keep in mind, and they're not major. But, I wrote this book a long time ago, which is interesting to think about. So, my thinking has evolved. It's consistent with what's in this book, but there's more nuances. And there's two things I would change or modify or tweak. One is I would modify the exercise selection. There's some exercises in there that I don't think need to be in there anymore. I won't say that they shouldn't absolutely be in there. I just don't think they need to be in there, and they're probably more distraction than anything. And one of them would be the one-arm chin-up. So I was doing a lot of body weight gymnastics training at the time. I was very excited about it. So I was training like one-arm chin-ups and stuff like that. And it gave me very bad elbow tendonitis. And it didn't ever translate into anything else. It was just sort of this party trick. So I don't say you have to do one-arm chin-ups in this book, but I explain it. I give progressions and I show how it can be put into the programming. And if I were to go back and revise the book now, if Wiley asked me to come back and do another edition, I would just take that out. I would say, any of these party trick type exercises like the one-arm chin-up, we're gonna get rid of it. Interestingly enough, the cover is me doing a pistol squat, and I don't think the pistol squat's the same as the one-arm chin-up, in the sense that the one-arm chin-up I think has a high risk to reward ratio. I think the risks, potential injury risks, especially for your elbow that come with the one-arm chin-up, just don't really make sense in relation to what you stand to benefit in terms of the one-arm chin-up. The pistol squat isn't like that, but the pistol squat is one of those moves that over time I've come to appreciate, that mechanically it's just not feasible for some people, depending on your sort of limb length. That people can be really strong, even really strong with one leg, and they're just never going to get a pistol squat. And I've seen a lot of people become frustrated by that, and it's really not their fault. So I don't know if I would get rid of it, but I would just make that point clear. So I would change some exercise selection. Now, the vast majority of exercises in here are I think, top-notch still. Number two is I would include more mid-range hypertrophy work. So the programming in here is a lot of kind of low-rep, heavy strength practice, which is great, with occasional bouts of high-intensity complexes and metabolic conditioning. And so if I were to go and tweak and modify the programming at this point, I would add more of the sort of middle of the road, moderate intensity, moderate rep hypertrophy stuff. Like your 6 to 12 reps, 3 to 4 sets, using an intensity that's around your 2 rep max for technical failure. So in relation to what I would change about my first book, those are the two things that I would modify. And of course, putting in a different title as well. So I just wanted to put that out there because I thought that was a good question. And like I said, we'll take whatever other questions you guys have. So let me know what you're thinking. Alex is sharing a book that he's reading about, a book called Rites of Passage. And he says, I'm not sure what it's about yet. A young man in the 19th century is traveling to Australia and writing an account of the voyage for his patron. It is entertaining and much easier than Moby Dick. I bet it is, my friend. Well, cheers, man. Thanks for sharing what you're reading. I'll share some of what I'm reading right now. Interestingly enough, enough people have recommended this book to me that I went and got it. And it's funny because we were just talking about the paleo craze, and the author of this book was sort of at the height of that. But I don't know if he considers himself paleo anymore. And that's Mark Sisson. You guys remember Mark? I think he's still out there doing all kinds of stuff. He's got like a food company, and anyway, he's got this book out, 2 Meals a Day. It's on intermittent fasting. And of course, we love to talk about intermittent fasting. We talk about it a ton. I recommend it pretty frequently. So I wanted to get this book. I wanted to read it. I wanted to try it. And then eventually I will be doing a review. I don't know if any of you guys have this book yet, but if so, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do I feel about it? Overall, pretty good. I think there's some things in this book that I would quibble with on the side of the nutritional science. But in terms of practicality and general recommendations and general structure, I think there's a lot to like about this book. But like anything else, when it comes to a specific plan, Dan John, got me to appreciate this, is that, give it a fair shot before you go out and blast it, especially in public. So I think it's only fair that I actually follow. He's got a 12-day kind of like jumpstart protocol in here. So I think it's only fair that I give that a fair shot before I really give any more of my formalized thoughts on books. When it comes to books that are really about sort of practical implementation, especially fitness books and diet books, I think it's a little cheap just to read the book and not do anything from it before you go out and start praising it or condemning it. Of course, some books are so far off the rails in their lunatic rantings that they do merit, I think, an immediate condemnation of saying, okay, this is just so utterly ridiculous, we can't even take it seriously. But a lot of books are not like that. And I think to fairly evaluate them, you actually have to give them a fair shake. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm halfway through his first 2-week thing here, 2 meals a day. I don't know Mark personally. I met him once. We spoke at a conference together a number of years ago, and we shook hands. Very friendly guy. He was really nice, but I don't know him. He didn't send me this book. I went out and bought it, and I'm just telling you what I'm actually reading right now. So there you go. But would love to hear what you're reading as well, so you can let me know. So that's the one nutrition book I'm reading. The one fitness book I'm about to start reading. By the way, I read relatively few fitness and nutrition books these days compared to other books in other categories, which we'll see. The other book I'm reading is Core Strength, CORPS. I don't say reading, about to read, which is one that my friend Jim recommended to me. So I can't say anything else. I don't even have it down here right now, but that's the fitness one that I'm about to read. Christine has a good question. She says, what books plans are off the rails? I mean, there's so many out there that are just like utter quackery. I haven't read any in a while because I think you start to get a sense of what those types of books are. They do often sit at the top of bestsellers lists. I mean, a good example of something like that would be, remember that guy Kevin Trudeau of the things they don't want you to know when it comes to health and fitness. And that's not to say that there was never anything right about those types of books, but that's the kind of danger, is like you take something that might be true or at least plausible enough, but then you wrap it in just layers of bullshit and quackery and stuff that is really dangerous. So that would be one example that stood out in my mind of a book that was hugely popular. I think actually you didn't have to try and live out all of his advice to I think give a reasonable condemnation of where somebody like that was coming from. I think he got in a lot of legal trouble too. I think he did end up getting a number of lawsuits. In fact, I feel like he may have even went to jail. I forget what the whole story is about that, but something like that. I haven't kept up enough of like the New York Times best-selling fitness and nutrition books to give you any others off the top of my head. But I'm happy to, if there's any out there, you can let me know. Mark says, have you read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius? It's my quiet place in the storm. I have many times. In fact, that was something I spent a lot of time with in college. I'm looking at it across the room in my bookshelf. It's right over there by Seneca. What is death but a release from the senses, says Marcus Aurelius. I've spent a lot of time with the Stoics. I think Stoic philosophy is very interesting, especially as if you're studying ethics and sort of the foundations of natural law and functional concepts of the good. I think you have to start with the Stoics. Or you don't have to start there. You just have to spend time there, right? A lot of interesting and good thoughts from the Stoics, and they serve, I think, as a useful bridge to other thinkers as well. So, indeed. I don't know what I should run over and grab my copy of it, but it's definitely something that I think people should have a look at, as well as other Stoics. Seneca, he's right there. Seneca's On Providence is a very interesting read. Tranquility of Mind, on Shortness of Life. Seneca's got an interesting life too. A number of people kind of charged him with a flagrant hypocrisy in many ways. I haven't investigated the details of that too much, but I always enjoyed reading him. Yeah, so thanks for the mention there, Mark. Yep. S. Finneran. I think that Sean says, hey, Pat, did you watch debate with Father Gregory Pine and Joe Schmid on divine simplicity? I have not. Unfortunately, I make a lot of podcasts and streams, but I have very, very little time to listen to other podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. Not just because of the work that I'm doing, but I don't have a commute. So like any regular time I would have to dedicate to like listen to something, a podcast or a YouTube video or something like that. It just, I have to like carve out the time. So like, and that's very difficult for me to do right now. But occasionally, if there's a topic that's interestingly enough, I'll try and review it and cover it on the podcast. Me and Brian Basong did that with something with Father Gregory's a little bit ago. I don't know if it would be cheeky to do it again with Father Gregory, maybe, but let me know. And if that would be interesting, maybe that's something we could put in the queue. Good stuff, guys. Good discussion. And cheers, by the way. Cheers. Let me know what you're drinking. Alex says, Mark, my son is named after Aurelius. I dip into meditations every so often for balance. Yeah, the Stoics can be very therapeutic. Very good. A good friend of mine who's been on the show a number of times, Dr. Kevin Vost, he's a psychologist. He sees the Stoics, and I think this is right, as just such useful, perennial, sort of just self-help, practical wisdom, right? For just dealing with the onslaught that is life. And I think that there's really something to that. Yeah. Horseman says, Pat, what are your thoughts on Hegel and his place in history of philosophy? Hugely important, right? I mean, he's somebody you can't overlook. And I think that, it's funny you bring this up, Horseman, because Jim and I are going to start a series sooner rather than later where we'll call it like Focus Friday or something like that, where we will take a thinker like Hegel or like a school of thought like Hegelian philosophy in general, or Hume or Kant or Plato. We already did one on Nietzsche. And in fact, I'm not a Hegel scholar expert. I need to spend more time on Hegel, but I mean, he's obviously hugely significant in the influence of his thought. But the point being is we're going to start a series where we go through these different thinkers and what their philosophy was, what their major contributions were. And we want to be mostly positive about it. I think it's always easy to go and take shots at people, but we want to really focus on what are the core insights here that are still valuable and worth mulling over today. And so Hegel is going to be, Jim knows a lot more about Hegel than I do. He spent a lot more time with Hegel than I do. So Hegel is going to be at the top of our list when we do that. So stay tuned because we're going to have much to say about Hegel. But the first one, and this gets into one of the books I wanted to recommend. So thanks for helping me kick this off. We're going to start with Platonism and Plato because, I mean, why not? Well, I mean, where better else a place to start? So one of the books I wanted to share with you that I'm rereading right now is a great book by Lloyd Gerson. It's called Aristotle and Other Platonists. And what he's doing in this book is he's kind of exploding the myth that Aristotle started out as a Platonist, but then became an anti-Platonist. And he's saying, actually, no, they're really kind of in the same family. And in this book, he has 7 points of what Platonism is. And what Jim and I are going to do is we're going to go through those 7 points, talk about those 7 points, see how they really sort of harmonize. They help you to understand Platonism broadly considered. I think they're a really good executive summary of Platonism, and show how that Aristotle is a Platonist, like he really is broadly considered, and then contrast that to what is certainly not Platonism, which is so much of modern philosophy, which Gerson will argue is sort of like best defined by what it is not, right? It's not realist. It's nominalist. It's mechanistic, right? It denies essentialism. It denies teleology. So we can get this really cool kind of, I think, contrastive analysis between perennial philosophy, Platonism, which I would include, one of my favorite thinkers, Thomas Aquinas, under that too, and sort of the sort of modern epoch that we're living in now. So stay tuned on Hegel. Hugely important. We're going to do a specific episode just on him, and I hope you can make that one. It'll be, I think it'll be a lot of fun. Okay, good stuff. I got I had some other questions. I'm going to get to your guys' questions here in the chat, so keep them coming. But I did have some other ones that I promised I would get to through email and Instagram. So let's just start diving in, and we'll have fun. At least I hope so. Sorry, I gotta pull up my thing here. Okay, this one comes from Jason. And Jason says, I'm constantly sleep deprived. I managed to get a walk in an easy strength workout 3 to 5 times a week and would like to try intermittent fasting to reach my body comp goal and waist size. I'm currently fasting on top of everything else. Oh, I'm concerned that fasting on top of everything else would be stacking too many stressors. Is there a fasting protocol that would be best for this situation, or should I forgo fasting altogether? So this is a really good question. It's a general question. I'm stressed. I'm busy. Kind of at my wit's end. I'm not sleeping well. Should I begin fasting, or is it going to be too much? And if I should begin fasting, what type of protocol should I begin with? I'm going to give a quick and simple solution to this. The answer is maybe. The answer is maybe you should begin fasting. But you're also right and wise and prudent that if you're already stressed, if you're already depleted, you don't want to keep adding too many stressors on your plate in terms of fasting, exercise, or otherwise. So I think it's very important to understand that fasting and exercise are similar here. Like how you apply it, the dose, the frequency will determine whether it's a eustress or a distress, whether it's something that you're going to benefit from or something that's going to further deplete you and cause you to feel worn and ragged and overtrained. So I would say if you're going to start with fasting, and sit down and think about if it's a worthwhile thing for you to do. But I say you can start with this. Start with a 5-2 fast. 5-2 fast is a very simple way to get started. It's not too much stress. And 2 days a week, you essentially just skip breakfast. It could be a Monday and a Wednesday or a Monday and a Friday. It doesn't matter. Just 2 non-consecutive days a week. You essentially just skip breakfast, have a lighter meal for lunch, a salad, a soup, a protein shake, and then kind of have just a normal but reasonable meal for dinner. So that is a good way to get acclimated to fasting, to have some of the benefits of fasting, which you're going to, pull some chunks of calories out of your diet, get used to being hungry, start to break the hedonistic hunger patterns. Like that's the problem. So many of us, we don't have real physiological hunger. A lot of time we have this sort of hedonistic hunger. We have cravings, not necessarily hunger. And fasting helps us to break that, which is important. I think just psychologically, if nothing else. So I would say if you're stressed and you're looking for a simple place to start, begin with the 5-2 fast. In fact, I have a For Dummies book on it. It's called Fast Diets for Dummies. Another terrible title, but I think a pretty good book. So that would be the sort of dip your toe in approach. So there we go. All right, let's see what else you guys got. Gordon Rock says, what do you say to clients who have it set in their mind that they just can't do something, be it weight loss or a very achievable standard, when the only barrier is their way of thinking? Yeah, Gordon, that's a really good and important question, isn't it? Because this is such an obstacle for so many people, where that there's this funny Scooby-Doo meme where it's Fred Flintstone is about to unmask the villain, and the meme says, I'm now going to discover who the source of all my problems is. And he unmasks the villain, and it's a replica of himself. It's well, you're the source of all your problems. And the point is we often sabotage ourselves with our own ways of thinking, negative thought patterns, and not just ourselves, but the environments we put ourselves in. We can enter into environments with a lot of contamination. And contamination is just not temptations, but just really negative people who just pull us down and discourage us, or even try to sabotage us intentionally or not intentionally. And I think what you have to do is you have to introduce them to some good books. I wish I would have do this question was in advance. I would have recommended some good books, because I was certainly in this thought pattern myself. So one good book to help people realize the power of thinking would be Psycho-Cybernetics. It's a classic book. And I would encourage your clients to read that book. It was helpful for me. It's been a while. Psycho-Cybernetics. I'm trying to remember who the Maxwell Maltz. It's a fascinating read. It gives really good practical insights on how to start to repattern your thinking. There's also books on neuro-linguistic programming, which is out there, and that's kind of a school of thought, which I think has a lot of good things. Some things that I think are a little out there or bizarre, but I've definitely picked up a lot of useful stuff for reprogramming my own thought processes and to stop sabotaging myself so much from thinkers in that. And actually, Tony Robbins, who most people know, he actually borrows a lot from that school of neuro-linguistic programming. So I would say start with get them to read some stuff on this, right? Because I think there's only so much you can do or should be expected to do as a personal trainer, right? And some of this is just kind of more outside the realm. It's in the realm of a psychologist or social worker or something like that. Another good book is just people are just so anxious all the time. They're just so anxious. There's a great book called Hope and Help for Your Nerves by Dr. Claire Weeks. Hope and Help for Your Nerves, and that will help a lot with negative thinking, especially negative obsessive compulsive thinking, which I think gets to the heart of where you're at. So if I could just recommend a few resources that you could give to clients and just hang a lantern on that and say, hey, here's what I really think is what you're struggling with. It seems like you're kind of stuck in these very negative sort of vicious and destructive thought patterns. And so I really want to work on your mindset and mentality. And here's a couple books I want you to read and start going with. I mean, this is a hard thing to break. It was a hard thing for me to break when I was like in high school and I was struggling with kind of my own, self-esteem and weight and fitness and all this or that. And I remember I read all this types of stuff. I would listen to tapes all the time, like motivational tapes and tapes from all different psychologists and stuff. So I spent a lot of time on this. Unfortunately, fortunately, it works. It really helped me. But unfortunately, it's been a long time since I spent time with that. I should probably revisit it. So all the resources are escaping me at the moment. But I think that is identify that you think that is the core issue, and then start to recommend some reading or some audiobooks or some thinkers that can really help identify that. If anybody else out here has any resources on what Gordon is talking about, please drop them in the comments. How you overcome negative thinking, self-sabotage, what you recommend to clients. We can get a little resource share. This is a book share, by the way. So everybody is invited to share your thoughts on this. Delicious. I love coffee so much. Slimmy Fatfoot says, for someone 10 to 20 pounds overweight, but with half decent muscle and history of resistance training, how long would it take to do a Marvel movie type transformation? Honestly, realistic. It depends like who we're talking about here, right? Like, is Wolverine Marvel? Was Hugh Jackman in the latest? I don't know the categories. Yeah, he's Marvel, right? X-Men is Marvel. I don't know if that's realistic for most people, but like, let's just say Thor's pretty big too, right? It's always hard to say what's going in Hollywood, but I'll tell you what, I think you can look really good enough. Like, yeah, good enough. Like if you've got 10 pounds to lose, decent muscle and history of resistance training, I think you can do a solid transformation in 3 months. If you really are willing to strategically overreach. If you're willing to strategically overreach, I think you can, closer to the 10-pound side, if we're just talking about realistically, and you're not going to be taking growth hormone or other stuff that people in Hollywood may or may not be doing. And you're really going to dial it in nutrition-wise and training-wise and do a strategic overreach. I think 3 months, you could see some really impressive results for something like that. But you have to give me a character. You have to tell me like what Marvel movie type transformation are we going for here? Okay, here's the follow-up from Slimmy. What progress happens for a person in A, months 1 to 6, 7 to 12, and months 13 to 18? Interested in how progress unfolds medium to long term. The short answer is it gets slower and much more tedious, and you have to be much more patient and precise, right? So if we're talking about fat loss, as you get leaner and more experienced and you have more muscle, it is much, much, much more difficult, much more tedious, much slower to, move from like in the teens of body fat percentage to the single digit body fat percentage. And it's not just slower and more tedious, but you have to be more precise. You have to track things better. You have to manipulate things better. And it's one of those things where if you just like a little mistake becomes much more serious as you try to move closer and closer to, I would say, a specialist type of goal, right? So we're all familiar with newbie gains, right? Like you take the person who hasn't worked out in 30 years and like it's like Unicorn Island, right? Like you just start them doing pretty much any form of resistance training and eating relatively healthy, and like all the good things happen, right? And you don't need like hyper precision. You just make some good general adjustments. They lose fat, they gain muscle, they experience a lot of body recomposition in that like first 1 to 6 months period, right? Then 7 to 12, you keep going and you start to have to refine things. It's okay, we can't be so general anymore. Now we have to be a little bit more specific. Maybe we should start working calorie cycles or tracking macros because, it's all about marginal returns. And so it's just that's what we're talking about, right? It's marginal returns. Then you kind of become a veteran. You're generally quite lean, strong, healthy, but now you want to go from 12% body fat to 8% body fat or 7% body fat. Now you're going to have to start getting very precise, very targeted, and dialing in a lot more things. So there's far less wiggle room when you start to go for these kind of specialized targets. From kind of like lean to ultra lean or even lean to very lean, that sort of thing. And it's also just going to take a lot longer. And that's where some of your process will have to change too, where, okay, before I could just kind of do like the shorter, intense resistance training and metabolic conditioning. But now if I want to like really go from lean to very lean, well, now maybe I have to start doing a lot more walking, a lot more kind of long, slow cardio, and just kind of like, again, it's tedious, man. That's my best advice, is it just slows down and the amount of precision you need is going to increase, if that makes sense. Yeah. Against Fascists says, Joe Schmidt is putting up some of the best arguments against classical theism. It would be great for you to review that discussion with Father Pine. Yeah, there's a lot of good arguments out there in the sort of coherence of theism. You got modal collapse arguments. You got contingent knowledge type of arguments. I have a paper, hopefully forthcoming, on both of those. So I want to see where that goes before I start putting it out on the public airwaves. But these are perennial issues. A lot of them, and what you'll kind of realize by studying the history of a lot of these issues is related to like divine simplicity and classical theism, is a lot of times it's the same issues coming up, issues concerning contingency and immutability and knowledge and beliefs and a contingent world that changes, and how do we preserve these things, right? A lot of these same problems come up again and again and again, just with different iterations. And a lot of different iterations sometimes have to like make you rethink what your previous solutions were. But that's a good thing, right? Because we have a theory, if we've got a model, objections are good. I think sometimes people have a poor attitude towards objections in philosophy. And my friend Josh Rasmussen puts it a good way, is he says, objections are argument testers, right? They kind of like test the structure that we've built. Like, is this a good structure? Can it withstand objections? And I've spent a lot of time trying to seek out what I think some of these best objections are, because I want to make sure whatever structure I'm in is a sturdy one, right? Now, at some points when it comes to like metaphysics and foundational stuff, I think a principled Mysterianism does come into play. But I think that's further down the road than a lot of people realize. I think sometimes people want to kind of like punt to a Mysterianism for some of these deeper metaphysical. And what I mean by that is, like, because of independent arguments, we can say things about God or classical theism like that this is the case, but because we're moving analogically and apophatically, we don't know how it's the case or what the details are. And I think that's something that needs to be stressed heavily in this type of context, is the process where we can say that something is the case, and we can be sure of that, even if we're not sure exactly how. Anyway, I'm not sure if that's related to anything that came up in the discussion you're talking about. But yeah, we'll see if we can put that in the docket at some point. We've got a lot of content we have to get through, but I appreciate the recommendations. Horseman says, great idea for a series of podcasts. I think Horseman is talking about Focus Friday. And I appreciate that, Horseman. I didn't, by the way, that came from a listener. So that's not a Pat Flynn original idea. And I wish I remember the listener that gave me that idea first, because I should credit people. That would be the nice thing to do. Slimmy has a reading recommendation, Dialectic and Dialogue, Plato's Practice of Philosophical Inquiry by Francisco Gutierrez, if I'm pronouncing that right. Appreciate the recommendation. Fatfoot, feel free to throw a link in there. So very cool. Let's do some more questions, guys. Horseman says, what are your thoughts on the relation between philosophy and literature and poetry? Yeah, I guess I've come to appreciate this a lot more as I've sort of gotten older. I guess my younger years of philosophy was just very much kind of had like that analytic bias where it's like, man, if we're not being supremely precise and rigorous, then I don't want to waste my time with it. But I don't hold that attitude anymore. I really don't. I've moved away from that. I think there's a lot of limits now to what analytic philosophy can do. Still a very powerful tool. But one book that changed my mind on this, it didn't change my mind on it, but it kind of affirmed me in that direction of thinking that there's a lot of value and truth to be found in literature and poetry and stuff like that, is Eleanor Stump's book, Wandering in Darkness. And this is a tremendous book because she's dealing with the problem of pain or the problem of evil, and especially in relation to a theistic context. Why, God? Why, God, do you let this world be so terrible so often? And she talks about the importance of second-person relationships, second-person relationships, and second-person narratives, and how the deep and important truths of these types of narratives cannot be reduced in a way that an analytic philosopher might prefer, and that these types of truths are only, if not or if not only, are at least best conveyed in narrative form. And of course, she spends a lot of time on books of the Bible, such as Job. Her commentary on the book of Job was just mind-blowing for, I think, the point that you're making, Horseman. I cannot commend that book enough. So yes, I think that there are important truths in, I do not, my epistemology is not arbitrarily restricted. I think there are important truths that we can have in literature, in various forms of narrative, in poetry. I'm looking at Rumi's collection of poems over there as well. That was a very important book for me many years ago as well. So I think it is an important relationship. What exactly that relationship is, will, I think, just depend on the genre of literature that we're talking about. But I'm glad you bring it up, because I think it was a mistake of my younger years to ignore the importance of different narrative genre literature and poetry, and I'm trying to make up for that now. So thank you for that important question. Ray says, Pat, how would you stack your stellar strong on programs like Super, Maximum, Shred, etc.? Well, thank you, Ray. I'm glad you think that strong on is stellar. I think you're stellar. It depends on the program. Some of them I don't think are stackable. I mean, some of them I think you just have to run sequentially or independently. Some of them are stackable, right? So, for example, like Maximum is a pretty heavy program. I would recommend doing Maximum by itself. Shred, you could you could stack that with like an easy strength. I think Shred would stack with an easy strength. So I'm sorry, Ray, I don't have a general answer for you, because I think it depends on the program. All of those programs are awesome standalone, so like none of them needs to be stacked. The question would only be in relation to any one of those programs. Could I stack it? Why do I want to stack it? Like, what's the purpose of doing this? And what could I stack it with? So just because you mentioned Shred, could you stack that one? Yes. Why would you want to stack it? Maybe you want to practice some specific strength moves rather than just kind of the body composition emphasis that is that program. What could you stack it with that it wouldn't cause you to enter into a period of unreasonable overreaching? And I think something like easy strength would make sense with that. So I hope that answers your question, at least partly. That's a good question, Ray. Horseman says his book recommendations would be anything by C. Oren and Ligati. Also, Moby Dick, Last Great Metaphysical Treaty. Also, Jorge Batallao. I'm sorry. You guys are giving me hard names to pronounce today. It can build you or sabotage you. Awesome. Thank you for those recommendations. I have a stack of books here. Let me start getting through these, because I will have to go at some point, and you guys are giving me lots of good stuff to talk about. I'm going to also be starting a series with a friend of mine, Eduardo, who's an astrophysicist. We wanted to start a series called Science or Sophistry, and like look out into like the popular headlines, And just because a lot of stuff is promoted as the science, right? And some of it's good, but some of it I think is very misleading. So we wanted to maybe, and you guys could give us ideas on things that you would want us to kind of critically analyze. Is this science or is this sophistry? Maybe it's a mix of both. It'll depend on the topic. So I'm revisiting a very good book by one of my favorite thinkers, Edward Fazer. It's called Aristotle's Revenge. And this book, it has a lot to say about the metaphysical foundations of physical and biological science. So if you're interested in philosophy of nature, philosophy of science, this is a tremendous volume. It's relatively new. It's got a great section on philosophy of time. Philosophy of time, man, that is tough stuff. But this is a book that I've returned to many times since I first got it. So I would commend that to you, especially if you're going to be interested in that series we're going to be doing on science and sophistry. Another book I wanted to mention because he's one of my favorite thinkers, and we've got a lot of interested philosophical minds in here, is Explorations in Metaphysics by Norris Clarke. A lot of people know his book, The One and the Many, but this is really a collection of his various articles and essays he published over the years, and it's just such a good book. And it covers metaphysics, epistemology, philosophical anthropology, just so many different and important subject areas. I just wanted to put that in your guys' ear. Another good, pretty technical, but I think supremely interesting book that I'm revisiting now for a paper that I'm writing is Alex Pruse's Infinity, Causation, and Paradox. Pruse is just a walking brain. I'm trying to get my relationship with infinity straight and try to make up my mind of what exactly I think about infinities. That's primarily why I'm revisiting this book right now. But it's a fun book because it's all about various paradoxes that arise when thinking about actual infinities and stuff like that. And Pruse offers a proposal in this book, which is a sort of restricted anti-infinitism, a causal finitism, which he says kind of like can deal with all these paradoxes at once. So it's a good book. It's a really good book if you're interested in that sort of thing. So I just wanted to recommend that as well. So those are the quick book shares that I wanted to get out to all you guys. But of course, you are free to recommend your own. So what's the summary of the books that I mentioned today? 2 Meals a Day by Siston, working through that. Explorations in Metaphysics, Aristotle's Revenge, Infinity, Causation, and Paradox. And if you are so intrigued, my own book, Paleo Workouts for Dummies. Justin says, trying to start swings, but I have bad flat feet, very tight hamstrings, and seem to have aggravation of a nerve in my left leg when going higher weight, anything above 25 pounds. Any advice? Yeah, I mean, there's so stuff like this is tough, right? Because I'm not seeing you move. So the best thing you could do, Justin, and this will be a general recommendation for anybody here, there's an awesome free resource that we have. It's free to everybody. It's the Strong On Facebook group. And if you just look up Strong On on Facebook, it is an incredible community, all related to generalist, minimalist kettlebell training, what we do. It's free to everybody. And I would say, Justin, if you want the best response from me, rather than just kind of speculation here from my basement without having seen you move, film a video of your deadlift and swing and just upload it to that group. You can tag me. There's other coaches in there, and we'll be happy to kind of give you a more informed assessment, right? Because that's the best way to go about something like this. If I haven't seen you move, I just don't have a great frame of reference. However, if very tight hamstrings, aggravated nerves, stuff like that, I would look seriously into Original Strength, the work of Tim Anderson and Original Strength, and start working through some of those neurodevelopmental movement patterns and see if it helps with anything. Alex Salkin also has a lot of good stuff on this. But if you just grab the original Strength and start working through the resets and you start doing them every day, I'd be very curious to see if that doesn't help with some of these issues and sort of frees you up and starts to improve your swing in some ways. But the best thing you could do is just snap a video, upload it to the group, and we will we'll have a look for you, my friend. And in fact, because I have this new streaming software, StreamYard, this thing is really cool. I'm still figuring it out. But if we get videos sent in, if you send them to me, I'll be able to upload them and critique them or give feedback in real time. So if any of you people are brave enough souls that you'd want your technique analyzed on one of these streams, be my guest. Email me at patflynn@chroniclesofstrength. Send me a snapshot of your swing. Just make sure if you're going to send me a video for a stream that if you're doing a swing, film it from the profile view, film it from the side, and make sure that your entire body is in the frame. Sometimes people send me videos all the time, just like on Instagram and this or that. And look, I just don't have time to personally go through every one. That's why I either post it in a group or be willing to have it put on a stream. But people send me videos all the time, and it's like I can just see like their one eyebrow in the video. It's like horribly filmed. It's like, I don't know what you want me to do with this. Horseman just responded that he's adding Wandering to Darkness to my wish list. It is a thick book, but it is incredible. I think you'll love it. All right, one more, and then we're calling it, friends, because I have to go on with my day. Slim says, what is your general take on homeschooling? My friend is homeschooling his son, and the kid has become a voracious self-directed reader. Well, I'm a fan because we homeschool. I'm a big fan. I have very little faith in the general government public education system in many ways. I think their curriculums are extremely inadequate and in many ways often harmful. I mean, where is the classic trivium? Where is logic, rhetoric, and grammar? Why are they learning all this profound nonsense all the time rather than the basics of how to think, how to read, how to write, how to do math well? So no, we made the decision to homeschool pretty early on, and our kids are performing really, really well in relation to their age. So I was a little bit hesitant at first. My wife was one who really wanted to explore that option, but now I am completely sold. We've got tremendous homeschooling communities around here. So like the whole worry about socialization is not an issue. In fact, it couldn't be better. So I'm a huge fan. If you have the option to homeschool, I think it is seriously worthy of consideration. And don't feel like you have to be an expert. We weren't, right? This was something that we figured out. If you guys are interested in homeschooling at all, let me know. I will do an episode on it. I'll bring my wife on, and we can just talk about what we do and kind of our initial hesitations and how we feel about it now. All right, last one. Dwight says, why are none of the Strong On posts shareable on Facebook? Do you mean this page? This page should be shareable. If it's not, let me know. I think that's an issue. And I would appreciate if you guys shared these videos and liked and commented. The Strong On group, though, however, is a private group. It's just sort of a it's a private group, and I want people to feel like they can share whatever they want in that group and that it's not going to leave the group. So that's done on purpose. So you come in, you share your techniques, you share your questions. It's related to the Strong On community. There's specific guidelines of how you have to act, right? There's an etiquette. You have a very specific etiquette. If you violate the etiquette, you're gone, you're out. But the reason those aren't shareable is for those reasons. I want people to feel like that's a space where they can come, ask whatever they want without any feeling like they would feel silly or embarrassed or anything like that. So it is a private group. You have to request approval. But you'll get it. We'll let you in. But it's free and it's a great resource. So would love for you guys to come in here. Slim says, heck yeah, on the homeschooling episode. Well, give me more feedback on that, guys. If we get enough votes for that, I would be happy to talk about what we do for homeschooling and be fun to bring my wife on the podcast and chat about that, I think. So that'd be something I would enjoy doing. All right, guys, we're going to sign off here. This was a whole heck of a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me last minute on this impromptu stream. Cheers. Again, if you enjoy these podcasts, a couple favors to ask. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and share. All that stuff, like it helps the algorithm, right? It's all about the algorithm. Your comments, your likes, your shares, it helps build the audience here, reach new people. So if you think we're doing good work, please do that. If you're listening on iTunes, over at the Pat Flynn Show on iTunes, please consider leaving a review, ranking the show. It also helps. I love you guys. You guys are great. I love these conversations. You all rock. And these morning coffee talks, impromptu coffee talks are fun. So maybe we'll make some more regular thing. Okay, guys. Cheers.